maybe in the early church they have more of like an idea of the end goal is you should really, really be like,
Yeah,
like
you should.
Christ.
Yeah,
That you should become like God, and it's in a much
yeah.
more real way.
Well, when we think of God likeness today, right? We'd probably conjure images more associated with Thor from the MCU than we would what God the Father is actually like. We would think of the powers of deity, right? Omnipotence, are all powerful, all knowing. So we would emphasize those qualities. And in the early church, the idea of deification, which is also the term that's used, is theosis, and which is in part taken from the 2 Peter 1 passage where it says we've been made partakers of the divine nature, right? And there's lots of Colossians 2, Colossians 1 and 2, there's Ephesians 1, 2, and 3, all talking, that the spirit of wisdom and revelation would dwell within you, right? These kind of things where we're looking at, there's something of the nature of God placed within each and every Christian. And frankly, one of the defining characteristics of the Christians in the first couple of centuries was the distinct belief that they had special access to God because of what had been accomplished in Jesus. And that belief waned. And part of the reason why it waned was because of the Desert Fathers. People started to look at centralized figures as the person to go to. And you find the kind of the idea of the holy man in the desert taking hold more into the 6th century, and we'll go to them and they'll pray for us rather than we have special access over and against anybody else on the face of the earth. That's one of the distinguishing characteristics of the early believers.
Yeah, I suppose there's probably some of the idea of like the relics and icons that come into that, where it's a glimpse into something divine that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. If you touch this icon or you see this finger bone or something, and it gives you something that you perhaps didn't have before.
Yeah. Well, the issue that's again goes to the giant divide between the view of culture in those ancient times and the view today. So I want to address that in a second, but just going back quickly to theosis and deification is there's no question that the earliest Christians, and by earliest Christians, I mean at least the first 500 or 600 years. So a quarter of Christian history viewed the purpose of salvation as deification. And the classic turn of phrase coined at least by Irenaeus, if not earlier, and then rephrased a number of different times by both Gregory's Nazianzus and Nyssa and Basil and Chrysostom, is God became man so that man might become God. That's the phrase that's used. I don't know why I'm holding a pen. The phrase that's used a number of times. And the idea is that when we hear it, it's offensive because we think
screams of blasphemy coming from the pulpits.
Yes. Because we think of power and authority, and they thought of humility and tenderness. So when God becomes man, God shows his softness towards his creation, that man might become God, because by grace we can't acquire his likeness unless his grace comes. If we acquire his likeness, we look like his humility, we look like his tenderness, we look like forgiveness, we look like sacrifice, we look like all of these things. And another phrase that I love that kind of sums it all up is about Macarius the Great, who was another disciple of Anthony the Great, a desert father. And they say Macarius became like a god on earth because he covered the faults of people that he saw.
That's
so
good,
when he looked, so that was the definition,
right?
Was
full of grace,
tenderness, forgiveness, grace, right? Not power, authority, and wielding that to my own end.
I mean, I see it as, whenever you say that phrase, it's like if you were to say, let's swap God, the term God, for perfect. If you said like the perfect became human or man, so that man could become perfect.
There you go.
Everyone knows that we can't be perfect, just as they know we
Yeah.
can't be God. It's kind of implicit in that. That just like it's not possible in the, like in the why am I blanking on the word, direct sense or whatever, that you can't, that isn't possible. But
totally,
it's a way of saying, that's, we can't become God, but to say that we become God is to say that we are at least resembling him, in a way that we didn't beforehand. There's
that's absolutely the point. That's the thrust of deification or theosis, is that the image of God is Jesus, and the image of Jesus is the sacrificing God. This is why in the evangelical tradition we tend to have we emphasize the empty cross, right? Jesus is risen.
Yeah.
And in the liturgical traditions, they put Jesus right on the cross, because to them, they're going, well, that's what God's like. He's the dying God that sacrifices himself, continually atoning.
Yeah.
So when we look at God, we see the perfect picture of humility, forgiveness, grace, love, and mercy.